Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS English, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So let's start with today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 8 important articles for a detailed analysis. We have 4 important topics which are crucial for both prelims and mains, and we have few small articles that are relevant only for the prelims exam. Apart from this, we have few economy related articles as well in today's newspaper as we are headed towards the budget session. So over the next couple of weeks, we are expected to have many more economy related articles. So what we will do is, tomorrow, the Hindu analysis will be taken up by Sham sir. So Sham sir will be discussing some of the economy articles that have appeared in today's newspaper as well. So I have kept those articles aside and I have chosen all the other important articles. So over the next 1 hour, 10 minutes, let's ensure that we cover all these topics comprehensively so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. The whole idea behind the initiative is to ensure that we simplify current affairs, and this channel should become a one-stop destination for civil services aspirants. If you guys are benefiting from the initiatives, do support us with your likes. That is what keeps us motivated. Do share your comments and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. And also, before I start, please join our Telegram channel as well, because every day after the Hindu analysis session ends on YouTube, we conduct a quiz on the topics that have been covered. We give you around 5 prelims questions which will help you practice for next year's prelims. This is one of the best ways to revise what you have studied in the class, and so do join the Telegram channel by using the QR code provided over here, or you can go to the description box of this video where the link for the Telegram channel has been provided. With this, let's get started with the first topic, and today we have multiple articles related to the same topic. Over the last couple of days, the biggest development has been the visit of Prime Minister Modi to Russia. This important visit comes at a very crucial time, and in fact, Western countries have even criticized India for arranging this annual visit. So this interaction between the top leaders of India and Russia has generated mixed feelings. India and Russia were looking forward to this visit. A lot of new agreements have been signed. A lot of progress has been seen in this critical relationship. But at the same time, the Western powers, especially United States and of course Ukraine, which is at the receiving end of the Russian aggression, they have been critical of this visit and they have criticized India's close relations with Russia. So in this context, we have to carefully examine this topic and understand India's position on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. We also have to discuss the achievements and the initiatives that were launched during PM Modi's visit to Russia. So what I will do is I'll take up all the articles in today's newspaper. On the front page itself, we have a headline article. We have an editorial on page number 6, and we have a number of articles on page number 11 as well. So I'll club all of them, I'll take them one by one, and we are going to discuss this topic very comprehensively. It is a very important topic for international relations under GS paper 2. So Prime Minister Modi, who visited Russia over the last couple of days, he called Russia as an all-weather friend of India. This was one of the most important statements that was made by Prime Minister Modi. So what do you mean by calling Russia an all-weather friend of India? It essentially means that Russia has always stood with India historically, since 1947 till date. Then it was the Soviet Union, and now the successor state of Soviet Union, which is Russia. These states have consistently stood with India whenever India faced a geopolitical crisis or a challenge. For example, be it the Kashmir issue with Pakistan, which broke out in 1947 itself, be it the integration of Goa into the Indian Union by fighting a limited conflict with the Portuguese, or be it our boundary issues with China, or be it the support for our nuclear and space program. at a time when Western countries, especially US, was targeting India's nuclear and space program. And at global platforms like United Nations, Russia and then Soviet Union, they stood firmly with India irrespective of what developments were taking place in the context of global geopolitics. Russia became the major arms supplier to India since 1960s itself. In fact, even today, our armed forces are heavily dependent on Russian weaponry and Soviet-era ammunition. Russia remains the backbone of India's defense supplies, and we indeed have built a truly strategic partnership. In fact, Russia was one of the few countries in the world which did not criticize India when we carried out the nuclear tests at Pokhran in 1998. When rest of the world, especially US and many other countries, were criticizing India's nuclear tests and placing sanctions on India, Russia was one of the countries which understood the need for India's nuclear tests, and it did not condemn the nuclear tests conducted by India. In fact, it is even said Russia in many ways enabled our nuclear weapons program as well, if not openly, at least secretly, that is covertly. So that is the reason why India often refers to Russia as an all-weather friend, a friend which has stood with India during difficult times, during good times, and that makes Russia one of India's most trusted partners. So it's only natural for India to reciprocate this gesture and stand with Russia no matter what Russia does. Because see, sometimes in international relations, you need to look after your own interests. If you look at the Russia-Ukraine war, which has been going on over the last couple of years, there is no doubt that Russia was the aggressor state. It was Russia which violated international law and broke the commitments under the UN Charter by breaching the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine. No matter what was the provocation or reason, Russia should not have attacked a country like Ukraine, a neighboring country, and breached and violated its territorial integrity and sovereignty. But India would not like to take a position on this. Rather, India would not like to be critical against Russia. India knows that Russia has violated the UN Charter. India knows very well that Russia has broken international law. But till date, India has never criticized Russia for its aggression. Not even once has India openly condemned Russia's military aggression against Ukraine. We know that Russia has caused human rights violations. Russia stands accused of committing war crimes and crimes against humanity. In fact, there is an arrest warrant issued by the International Criminal Court against Russian President Putin and several top Russian officials. Of course, India is aware of all these developments, but India chooses not to criticize Russia, and this is a strategic choice that India has made. In fact, this is the right approach that India should have taken, and correctly the Modi government has pursued this approach. This policy dates back to the days of Prime Minister Nehru, in fact. It was Prime Minister Nehru who laid down the principle of strategic autonomy, meaning India will pursue an independent foreign policy which is designed to protect India's interests. Sometimes in the world of international relations, you may have to keep aside your values, your ethics, principles, and morals. Sometimes geopolitics appears to be cold-hearted, but unfortunately that's how it is. Countries often look after their own self-interest, and there is nothing wrong with that. See, for example, if India were to interfere in the Russia-Ukraine conflict and let's say condemn Russia or vote against Russia or join the Western powers to impose the sanctions against Russia, this would only hurt India because Russian arms supplies to India would be disrupted. Russia's energy supplies and the critical partnership that we have, the strategic partnership, that would get affected. And it would have no impact on Ukraine. It's not that Russia would overnight end the war just because India has joined the Western bloc in criticizing Russia. That won't happen. So India knows, India realizes that it won't be able to intervene directly as far as the war is concerned, as far as the conflict is concerned. So in such a scenario, it's better to protect your interests, to ignore the human rights violations, to keep aside your values, morals, and principles, and strictly pursue a policy which is focused on India's national interests. That is exactly what every Indian government has done, not just with Russia, with many other countries as well, right? In international relations, what matters, it's the interest of the country, the permanent interest, the national interest of a country. So India has pursued this policy. We have ignored the Russian violations, right? We say that we have taken a neutral position, a balanced position. But in reality, you actually see a Russian tilt, a pro-Russian tilt in India's policy. If you look at the position we have taken on the Russia-Ukraine war, officially we say that it's a neutral, balanced position. But in reality, there is a clear pro-Russian tilt that you get to witness. Now, let us justify this argument. Let us see what is the pro-Russian tilt in India's policy. See, for example, we have bypassed the Western sanctions. India has bypassed the Western economic sanctions on Russia. In fact, India has even become one of the biggest buyers of Russian oil. Russia has been selling its oil at a discounted price in order to keep its economy running, because the Western sanctions did have an impact on Russia. So India and even China, they bypassed the sanctions and they have become one of the biggest buyers of Russian oil. And India has immensely benefited from this. In many ways, indirectly, India has funded the war in Ukraine. Almost $55 billion worth of oil was purchased by India just in the previous fiscal year. In fact, the large part of our trade with Russia is because of the oil imports that India has been carrying out. This also helps reduce our import bill. This is smart diplomacy on India's part, right? We are not only securing energy supplies, but we are procuring oil at a much cheaper price, at a discounted price, which reduces our import bill. Because as you know, India has a lot of import dependency when it comes to oil and hydrocarbon supplies. So since our import bill shoots up when we procure from other countries, one way to balance it out and to reduce the import cost of oil is to procure the cheaper oil from Russia. And that's why in the last 2 years, Russia has become one of the largest oil suppliers to India. It has even overtaken Saudi Arabia and Iraq to emerge as the top oil supplier to India. So India has leveraged the conflict to its advantage. We have served and protected our interests. We have protected the trusted all-weather relationship with Russia, and we have abstained from every vote. Any vote brought up against Russia at United Nations and other global platforms, India has abstained from all these votes. When US and other countries were pushing resolutions at UN General Assembly, UN Security Council, at UN Human Rights Council, India abstained from all these votes, thus signaling our neutral, balanced position with a clear pro-Russian tilt. So that is the reason why US and European countries and even Japan and Australia and other Western powers, they are not pleased with India's relations with Russia. They can't understand, they can't digest the fact that the world's largest democracy has been engaging with a country which is seen as authoritarian, a country which has been sidelined and isolated by the rest of the world. So now, for India's leader to visit the country, that too immediately after elections, that also shows a symbolic gesture that India does prioritize its relations with Russia. Because of the war, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, high-level visits had not taken place in the last 4 to 5 years. So now that PM Modi has visited Russia, met with Putin at such a critical juncture, it just signifies how close India-Russia are. India has taken the risk because we know that we would attract criticism from Western powers. Because the timing is also very crucial. On the same date when PM Modi landed in Moscow, NATO, which is at conflict with Russia, right? Essentially the war in Ukraine is a direct result of the tensions between Russia and NATO. NATO's expansion into Eastern Europe and its influence in Ukraine is what pushed Russia to attack Ukraine, right? So on the very same day when PM Modi landed in Russia, NATO was marking its 75th anniversary. It was marking its 75th anniversary in the United States, and at Washington, the NATO summit has been organized. So during the NATO summit, India chose to arrange this annual visit, and that again shows how India is trying to, protect its ties with Russia irrespective of what the Western countries are saying about it. This doesn't mean we have ignored the concerns of Ukraine. This doesn't mean we have ignored the concerns of US and Western powers. India has indeed shown some balance in the position, and that was at display during the Prime Minister's visit. So let's take a detailed look at how India is balancing this pro-Russian tilt. Let's see what are we doing to bring this conflict to an end. See, India has always insisted that war is not a solution. In fact, during the Bali G20 summit in 2022, PM Modi met with Putin and urged Putin and told Putin directly that this is not the time for war. Even during yesterday's visit, PM Modi has directly brought up the issue with Putin and urged Putin to find a peaceful solution to the conflict. PM Modi stated, and I quote, that a peaceful solution cannot be found on the battlefield. Peaceful solution is found on negotiating table, not on the battlefield, which is a direct call from India to push Russia in a positive way, not in a hostile, aggressive way, but we are nudging a friend, we are pushing a friend to bring this unnecessary war to an end and end the human suffering. PM Modi has highlighted the human rights concerns, because in Russia, we have seen there has been complete disregard for human rights, and even civilians in Ukraine have been targeted. Schools and hospitals have been repeatedly bombed. In fact, just hours before PM Modi landed in Russia, Russia carried out a major attack on a children's hospital, and even children have been killed. So PM Modi brought up the issue of human suffering, especially children losing their lives due to conflict, and has urged President Putin to find a peaceful solution through talks, through negotiations, and to ensure that the war ends. So this is India playing the role of a mediator. In fact, many countries, many experts and analysts, they believe that India has the potential to bring that positive influence on Russia, and potentially we might even act as a mediator between Russia and Ukraine. But of course, Ukraine was not happy with the Prime Minister's visit. Ukrainian President Zelensky tweeted and he criticized India openly. He criticized PM Modi for meeting President Putin, who has been declared a war criminal. Right? So Ukraine is of course not happy with India's position, but still we have leverage with Ukraine. We have a leverage with Western countries as well. And we could potentially use that to push Russia to agree for a negotiated settlement. Even US and Western powers have been informed by India that we are pushing for an end to the war. If you look at the statements made by the US State Department, the US State Department, it said that it doesn't appreciate India's close ties with Russia, but it urged Prime Minister Modi to bring up the conflict and push Russia to end the war. And that is exactly what India has done. Without a hostile, aggressive approach, keeping in mind the friendly relations with Russia, we have brought up the issue. We have forcefully urged Russia to end the conflict and find a peaceful solution and ensure that the war comes to an end. So that is how India has been trying to strike this balancing act. It's a diplomatic tightrope that India has been walking. So this is one important development that you need to understand. The other important development is that Ukraine has signed a security deal with Poland. When PM Modi was visiting Russia and India-Russia were signing agreements, Ukraine also has signed an agreement with Poland. Ukrainian President Zelensky was in Warsaw and they have signed a security agreement. Now, why is this important? It is important because Poland is a NATO member. Poland is a member of NATO. And through this security agreement, Poland has been approved by Ukraine to launch air defense missiles into Ukrainian airspace to counter any Russian attacks. See, Russia has been firing missiles, rockets, and even drones, armed drones, into Ukrainian territory. Ukraine has been struggling to defend itself against these aerial attacks from Russia. So Poland has agreed to provide the air defense support, which means a NATO member in a way is entering the conflict. So going forward, Poland could possibly launch air defense missiles into Ukrainian territory, into Ukrainian airspace to intercept any incoming Russian projectiles. So that would be the first time that a NATO member would be potentially intercepting Russian weapons that have been fired at Ukraine. So this is an interesting development that we need to watch out for, right? This could potentially have consequences because Russia might react aggressively if a NATO member were to intercept Russian missiles, that too in Ukrainian airspace. The other key point that you should note down is the progress of the war. Where does the war stand as of today? It's been more than 2 years since the war began. What is the current status? Has Russia made any progress? Has Ukraine been able to defend its territory? Where do the combatants stand? Where do the aggressor states, where do they stand as of today? See, Russia has been making very, very slow progress. Despite being a major military power, it has not been able to push Ukraine, even though it has captured some territories in eastern Ukraine. It has captured the Donetsk region, the Donbas region, and even integrated those parts of eastern Ukraine into Russia. It has even captured few villages near the Kharkiv region. But apart from that, Russia has not been able to make any major advances. Now, this raises serious questions about the military capabilities of Russia. Initially, when the war began, analysts were expecting that Russia would completely wipe out Ukraine and maybe even entirely occupy Ukraine. But that has not happened because Ukraine has been able to resist. Ukraine has shown tremendous resilience. And of course, there is a lot of aid and support coming from the West, coming from NATO allies. The US and European Union, they have pumped billions of dollars in military aid, supplied weapons and intelligence and even training, which has enabled Ukrainian forces to withstand the Russian attack and even push back Russian troops in some places. But today, Ukraine is in no position to achieve a battlefield victory. It is holding the position, it's holding the ground after losing some territory, but it is in no position to regain the lost territory. It's in no position to push Russian troops out of the country. So, which means the war is at a stalemate. It has hit a dead end. And also, Ukraine has used innovative options, especially armed drones, have been effectively used by Ukraine to weaken Russia, especially in the Black Sea. Russian Navy has suffered significant losses because of the strategic usage of armed drones by Ukraine. Even in Russian mainland, several critical targets have been attacked by Ukraine by using rudimentary armed drones, which are very cheap and easier to use and launch. So in that regard, Ukraine has done quite well to withstand the Russian attack and even resist the Russian attack. So as of now, the war is at a stalemate, it's a dead end. So that is why countries like India have a pivotal role to play. India can actually push both the sides to come to the negotiating table and talk and resolve this conflict and bring this bloody war to an end. Is that clear? As a democratic country, India has that right position. We do have leverage with Russia in particular, right? Positively, without triggering Russia or without provoking Russia, India can exert a positive pressure to convince both the parties to come to the negotiating table. Now, the US will have to do the same with Ukraine. US and European partners, they have to convince Ukraine as well to agree for talks and bring this war to an end as soon as possible. So this was one of the priorities of Prime Minister Modi during the visit. Understood? So this issue was brought up by Prime Minister Modi, and this again shows the balanced, neutral position of India. But are we truly neutral? No. There is a clear pro-Russian tilt, but we are trying to balance it out by pushing for a negotiated end to this conflict. Now, let's move away from the war and look at other areas of cooperation and other achievements and agreements that were signed during PM Modi's visit. Let's talk about the trade and economic relations between India and Russia. See, India-Russia trade relations have really boomed in the last 2 years, and the trade volume has touched $65 billion. Before 2022, our trade relationship was very minuscule. Apart from defense relations and some minor trade, India-Russia trade relationship was not a major trade relationship. But because of India buying Russian oil in massive quantities, the trade volume has jumped to $65 billion. As I was mentioning, Russia has emerged as one of the top oil suppliers to India. So out of this trade volume, almost $55 billion is just oil imports by India. Only the remaining $10 billion is spread out across other sectors, and it accounts for India's exports. But majority of what we have imported is Russian oil. Majority of this bilateral trade volume is comprised of Indian imports of Russian oil. So this is not a balanced trade relationship. See, first of all, we have faced payment related issues. Because of the sanctions, we can't use the dollar-based system, the SWIFT banking route, right? We have used innovative methods. We have used the Chinese yuan, UAE's dirham, and we have even used the Indian rupee to settle these payments. And still we have a lot of dues that are pending. We even opened Vostro accounts and deposited the money in Indian rupees in Indian banks, which Russia could use to procure goods in the Indian market. So many such innovative routes have been opened by India, but still it's not enough to make the payments because the volume of oil imported by India is huge, it's massive. So there is still a big deficit. We still owe some dues to Russian oil exporters. So India and Russia are trying to solve this issue. They are trying to come out with an arrangement to continue payments using their national currencies. They have signed an agreement for this, to continue the usage of national currencies, to use the Russian ruble and the Indian rupee to settle the trade balance without relying on the dollar system, without relying on the Western dominated banking system. So this is a major agreement that has been signed. India would like to continue this trade relationship. We would like to import Russian oil, but we want some balance to be brought in. We want Indian exports to increase. Indian exports to Russia has to go up. See, India has benefited in many ways because of the import of cheaper oil. In fact, we have re-exported the same oil and we have turned this into petrochemical products, and we have re-exported this back into Europe. Look at the irony of this. European countries were trying to block Russian oil products by imposing sanctions, but they end up buying the same products from India, which would have processed those products, and in a way they are paying a higher price as well. So India has truly benefited from the war economically. Purely from an economic point of view, India has definitely benefited from the conflict. That's why European countries, they accuse India of being a laundromat country. They say that India is laundering Russian oil. But India ignores these concerns. We deny these allegations as well, because just like any other country, we are looking after our own self-interests. The US always does the same. European countries have done the same. Every country in geopolitics, they look after their own self-interests. That's exactly what India has done. And also India has really mastered the art of multi-alignment. We align with any country which will serve our interests, right? We have moved towards a policy of non-alignment, from a policy of non-alignment towards multi-alignment, and we align with every partner, with every country, whoever can serve India's interests. So with regard to trade relations, there is a tremendous opportunity that exists. We are looking to establish few critical connectivity projects that can bring India-Russia closer. This will be a big boost for trade between India and Russia. For example, we are looking to establish a corridor, the INSTC corridor, International North-South Transport Corridor, that passes through Iran and Caspian Sea and connects with Russia. This will be a shorter route to reach Russia compared to the longer route through Suez Canal and across Europe. It will reduce the time taken, the cost involved, and thus it will benefit trade between India and Russia. We are also looking at establishing a maritime link between Chennai and Vladivostok. Compared to the Western Sea route, which is much longer, we are exploring an eastern maritime route to connect the port of Chennai with port of Vladivostok, so that this will connect India directly with the Russian Far East. The Russian Far East is of great interest for India. It is basically the Siberia region, which is blessed with resources. In fact, India is actively involved in the Russian Far East. We have major investments in Russian Far East. For example, the Tata Group owns coal mines in Siberia. There are several other Indian companies owning diamond mines and other important establishments are present, which are harnessing the resources present in the Far East region of Russia. We have ONGC Videsh Limited, which has invested in the Sakhalin region to explore the oil and gas reserves. Right? So we have major investments in Far East region of Russia. We have committed $1 billion worth of investments, and a connectivity route between Vladivostok and Chennai will be a big boost for trade, because we have a consulate as well in Vladivostok. So this route could be immensely beneficial for both the countries. And we are also exploring other important areas. For example, polar research, especially exploration of the Arctic, utilization of the North Sea route, the Northern Sea route, which is opening up because the Arctic ice is melting, which allows for movement of ships, and a geopolitical competition has already broken out in the Arctic. And India would like to play a bigger role in the Arctic by aligning with Russia. So our focus on the Russian Far East, our focus on these connectivity projects like Chennai-Vladivostok route, the opening up of the Northern Sea route with Russia, they all hold great potential for India-Russia collaboration. Right? So these were the issues that were discussed, plus India is opening new consulates at Yekaterinburg and Kazan, because the Indian community is increasing in Russia. We have more Indian students and workers, and the diaspora community is growing. So to provide the consular services, 2 new consulates are going to be opened. And this was another achievement during PM Modi's visit to Russia. Then India brought up another critical issue, a pressing issue which has been affecting India. It is the recruitment, the illegal recruitment of Indian youth into Russian army. Several Indian youth have been misled, especially by the middlemen, the middle agents and human trafficking cartels, to go to Russia by luring them with the promise of a lucrative job. They have promised them salaries of 2 lakh rupees a month. They have promised even possible Russian residency and even Russian citizenship. And essentially they have been tricked to join the Russian army, and they have even been deployed to the war front with Ukraine. According to reports, more than 100 Indians have already served Russia in some way or the other. With no battle training, with no war experience, they have been tricked and misled and lured to fight for Russia on behalf of Russian forces. Because Russia is facing a critical shortage of manpower, and it is working with these middlemen and human trafficking cartels to recruit the youth from developing countries and poor countries by paying them higher salaries. And unfortunately, 4 Indians have already been killed. 4 Indians have already lost their lives. So it has become a priority for India to bring them back, to get them discharged from service. According to reports, at least around 50 Indian youth remain in Russia under the services of the Russian army. So PM Modi has brought up this issue, put a lot of pressure on Putin, and apparently, according to reports, Putin has promised to address the issue and relieve and discharge all the Indian youth from the war front and send them back to India. Is that clear? Even if they wish to continue, the option will not be provided. Formally, it has not been announced, but Russia has apparently agreed, according to reports, to discharge the Indian youth from service and repatriate them back to India so that this core concern of India is addressed. Plus, Russia has announced a compensation for the families of 4 Indian youth who lost their lives in Ukraine. It has announced a big compensation along with a citizenship offer to the family members. So this issue stands resolved. Hopefully, it should be implemented as soon as possible. Right? As I said, according to the Indian embassy in Moscow, there are at least another 50 Indian youth who are deployed at the battlefront. So if Russia honors this commitment, they will be discharged very soon, and maybe in few weeks, they would be sent back to India. And finally, India brought up another core issue, which is terrorism. Especially terrorism that emanates from Pakistan is a core concern for India. Russia also is concerned about the presence of extremism in the Afghanistan-Pakistan belt. Recently, you might remember, a terrorist group called ISIS-K, Islamic State Khorasan, which operates in the Afpak region, carried out a deadly attack against Russia. So, it's in the common interest of India and Russia to jointly counter terrorism, and they both have condemned the terrorist safe havens that exist in the region, which is basically a reference to Pakistan. They have even pointed fingers at China. Without naming China directly, they have called upon countries to not support such states which are sponsoring terrorism. Because China is known to protect Pakistan, especially at United Nations, at FATF and other platforms, whenever Pakistan is targeted for sponsoring terrorism. For example, India has tried to designate global terrorists through the UN Security Council Sanction Committee, the 1267 Sanctions Committee. But China has repeatedly blocked India's proposals to shield Pakistan. Even at Financial Action Task Force, China has offered protection to Pakistan. So India and Russia have jointly criticized all forms of terrorism, and they have criticized the countries which sponsor terrorism, which provide safe havens, and they have criticized countries which shield these sponsoring countries as well. So this was the major development that we saw during PM Modi's visit to Russia. So based on this, you can get a question, right? So let's look at this practice question. Let's see how you can build a good answer for this question. India's time-tested relationship with Russia has withstood the pressure of war in Ukraine. Critically examine. See, you can start the answer with an introduction about the history, the brief background of India-Russia relations. Because the question is focused on the time-tested relationship of India and Russia. So focus on Russia being an all-weather friend of India. In 3 or 4 lines, in one small paragraph, you can explain how Russia has always stood with India. From Kashmir issue to our nuclear program, to supplying weapons to India during the Cold War, right? Russia has always backed India, supported India. So this establishes Russia as an all-weather friend of India. So that would be a great introduction, but you can also mention that the war in Ukraine has tested our relationship. It has posed a difficult choice for India because we are under pressure from the Western countries and rest of the world to break our ties with Russia and to criticize and condemn Russia. So that sets the context for your answer, and then in the body, you can further expand your argument and provide substantiating evidence. You can talk about India's position with regard to the Ukraine conflict. Discuss the neutral, balanced position of India, but how there is a clear pro-Russian tilt. You need to present both sides of the argument, right? You need to say that officially India is neutral in this conflict. We have a balanced position. We are urging both sides to end the war, to negotiate. We are working with Western countries and Ukraine as well to push for negotiations. We have brought up the issue with Russia as well to go for a negotiated settlement. That shows our neutral, balanced position. But in reality, there is a pro-Russian tilt to protect our time-tested relationship. That is how India has overcome the pulls and pressures of this conflict. We have bypassed the sanctions. We have not criticized Russia. We have abstained from all the votes. And we have been one of the biggest buyers of Russian oil. We have continued our defense and strategic relations. So that explains India's position with regard to this conflict and how we have protected our ties with Russia. And finally, you can conclude your answer. Conclude the answer by saying that this is not the time for war. This war has hurt not just Ukraine, it has hurt India, it has hurt rest of the world as well. It disrupted the supply of food grains, creating food security problems in many countries. It hit the global economy. because the COVID-19 pandemic had already disrupted the supply chains, and now the Russia-Ukraine war has had an economic impact. Oil prices were disrupted. Also, obviously, India was affected as well. So it's high time that the world finds a solution to this war, and India is in a right position to positively influence Russia and maybe, potentially, even act as a mediator between the two sides. So that makes a great conclusion, and you can bring your answer to an end. So now let's look at the next topic. We will take up this editorial from page number 6 related to internal security. Specifically, it's related to the situation which is developing in Jammu and Kashmir. Now, there is a very disturbing trend, a very alarming trend which has developed in J&K over the last few months, especially in the last few weeks. The number of terror attacks have gone up significantly in Jammu and Kashmir, especially in the Jammu region. See, historically, as far as militancy in J&K is concerned, which also involves cross-border terrorism supported by Pakistan, we have generally seen the terror attacks being concentrated in the Kashmir Valley, in areas closer to line of control, closer to POK, and also in areas where separatist tendencies are high. For example, in Anantnag district, even in parts of Srinagar, right? So in some sectors of Kashmir, there has been some element of local support for separatist, militant and terrorist activities, and there has been an involvement of Pakistan as well in providing state support. There has been an involvement of foreign terrorist organizations, from Hizbul Mujahideen to Lashkar-e-Toiba to Jaish-e-Mohammed and even Harkatul Mujahideen. There have been locally bred separatist outfits as well, like JKLF, Al-Badr and the others. So host of terrorist organizations, all of them backed by Pakistan, have created repeated trouble in Kashmir. But of late, Jammu has emerged as the hotbed of extremism. If not for local support, there has been a planned attempt, a deliberate attempt to exploit the weakness in the Poonch, Rajouri sector to mount major attacks against Indian forces and also against civilians. You might remember on the 9th of June, when the new government was being sworn in, when PM Modi was taking the oath for the third time, on the very same day, the terrorists timed and carried out a precise attack. They attacked a bus carrying pilgrims, and this was one of the most serious terror attacks to have taken place in the region. And in the last few days, in the Kathua region, there have been several militants who have launched targeted attacks against the Indian Army. Indian Army has suffered significant losses. Many soldiers have been killed. There are active counter-terrorist, counter-insurgency operations going on in the Poonch Rajouri division and in the Jammu sector. Right? Indian Army has neutralized some of the terrorists as well, but the conflict continues. The encounters are continuing, and it points towards the weakness of Poonch Rajouri sector. See, back in 1990s and early 2000, when militancy was at its peak in J&K, major attacks were happening in Kashmir and attacks were happening in Poonch Rajouri sector as well. But terrorism was in general brought down by the Indian forces, by Indian Army, by the J&K police, our intelligence agencies and even the paramilitary forces, by focusing on effective counter-terrorist, counter-insurgency operations. Through Operation Sarp Vinash, which was carried out in 2003, the Indian forces managed to weaken the local support. They plugged the security gaps. They improved intelligence collection and gathering at the local level. And thus, we almost put an end to militancy and terrorism in Kashmir. Right? We managed to push back the infiltrators who were coming in from Pakistan and almost brought the foreign support to an end, at least to a certain extent. Local support was also better tackled. Plus, we managed to get a lot of local support from various communities, like the Gujar, Bakerwal communities, who stood with the armed forces, provided timely intelligence inputs, which helped India to almost crush the movement in J&K. But of late, we are seeing a revival attempt. And since Kashmir has been heavily fortified, our forces have been always focused on Kashmir. Even our intelligence agencies are focused on Kashmir. So here, the opportunities available for an attack is very limited. But in the Jammu region, there are many weaknesses that are being exploited. Also, we are facing a shortage of troops because most of the troops of the Northern Command, which is headquartered at Udhampur, they have been repositioned towards Ladakh since 2020. Due to the ongoing military standoff with China since the last 4 years, a large number of troops of the army have been repositioned towards the eastern part, that is towards the Ladakh region. This has created a security gap in the Jammu region, in the Poonch-Rajouri division. And also the terrain, the geography over here is complicated. You have mountainous region, dense forests with boulders. So the terrorists can easily sneak in across the line of control. They can hide in the jungles and forests in the mountains, and they can even seek shelter behind the boulders. And they are specializing in carrying out ambush attacks against the convoys of the Indian Army. They are specifically choosing the routes through which Indian Army trucks will be passing through. They will choose the narrow roads. They will launch a surprise attack from 2 or 3 sides, and thus they will ensure more casualties for the Indian Army. This also has raised questions about our poor intelligence gathering at the local level in the Jammu region. It has raised questions about the SOPs being followed by the Indian Army. That is exactly what the editorial is pointing out. Yes, we need to tackle the threat of terrorism, right? But we need to identify the shortcomings first. The Indian Army has been stretched thin. Because of the redeployment towards Ladakh, there is a security gap which has been created. And since we have been focused more on Kashmir, there has been less attention on Jammu, creating gaps in intelligence collection. Plus, local support is something that is critical in any conflict. And this is where Indian security forces and intelligence agencies need to work upon. They should follow the standard protocols when they are moving the convoys, right? When there is a movement of large number of troops, adequate security measures have to be taken and SOPs have to be followed. We all saw what happened during the deadly Pulwama attack, right? The CRPF, it had breached the established SOPs and it was moving large number of troops in a very unprofessional manner, which in a way led to higher casualty rate. So in such a high risk zone, the security forces have to be double careful and they have to follow the established SOPs and ensure that we don't give a chance for the terrorists to launch such attacks. The army has suffered major setbacks, number of Jawans have been killed and even civilians have been at the receiving end. And the worst part is that there was one incident recently, a few months ago, where Indian Army retaliated. A few rogue soldiers retaliated against civilians, leading to human rights violations. A few civilians were eventually killed, and currently an investigation is going on and those rogue officers have been suspended as well. The Indian Army has even accepted that such a wrongdoing was done and those rogue soldiers are being held accountable. So such developments, it will only create a distance between the security forces and the local people. In order to win an ideological war, you need local support. You need the local people to be on your side. So there is a lot more that India has to do to defeat terrorism in Kashmir and also in the Jammu region. Just deploying troops won't be enough. Today, terrorists are using modern technology as well, right? To find the viable routes through which they can reach India and target India. They are using new financing methods. Pakistan has become more innovative in the ways in which it has been sponsoring terrorism against India. So we need to scale up our preparedness. We have to improve the security grid in the Jammu region, ensure that we have a physical presence on the ground, ensure that we increase the troop deployment, but that alone is not enough. We have to work with local communities, create the local support, generate local intelligence, ensure we follow the SOPs. So all these measures are collectively required to defeat the menace of terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir. That is what we learn from this important editorial. Now let's look at a practice question related to this topic. India needs more than troops to combat militants in J&K. That is a statement. Discuss in the context of recent surge in terror attacks in the Poonch-Rajouri sector. So it's a very specific question which can be asked in GS paper 3 under internal security. So what you can do is, in the introduction, you can talk about the recent trend. How in the last 2 years, we have seen a reactivation of the Jammu division. In the Poonch Rajouri sector, we have seen a number of attacks that highlights the security gap. It shows the new strategy, the new tactics that terrorists are following, that Pakistan has been following. So once you set the context in the body, explain why this has been happening. Explain the reasons. Explain the redeployment of troops towards Ladakh, the weaker security grid. This could also be a bit of complacency, because over the last 15-20 years, terrorism almost vanished in Jammu region. So maybe Indian forces and agencies, they got a little complacent and we started focusing only on the Kashmir region. So this maybe created a security gap. Plus, it highlights gaps in local intelligence gathering. It raises issues about the local support which terrorists are enjoying, and apparently local support is missing for Indian forces. So this is something that needs to be addressed, along with the developmental issues and political issues. So discuss all these pointers, and in the conclusion, provide a suggestion, a way forward, how India can defeat the menace of terrorism, especially in the Jammu region. And that completes your answer. Now, let's look at another important column from page number 7. Here the writer is talking about the iCET initiative, which is a major initiative launched between India and United States. In 2022, US President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Modi proposed the iCET initiative. It stands for Initiative for Critical and Emerging Technologies, abbreviated as iCET. The idea is to promote cooperation between our public organizations, government research organizations, private organizations and companies, and even the startups, and create an ecosystem where Indian and American institutions can collaborate in the field of critical emerging technologies. So this includes collaboration in the field of semiconductor production. It includes collaboration in the field of artificial intelligence, quantum technology, quantum computing, even in the domain of space, and as well as advanced communication like 6G network, etc. So in such critical emerging areas, India, US are collaborating, and there is a special priority given under iCET for defense technology collaboration. So this initiative was launched formally in 2023. Last year, when Prime Minister Modi visited the United States, iCET was launched. So under this, the US is supposed to provide transfer of technology to India when it comes to certain critical military hardware that we are procuring from American defense manufacturers. For example, last year during PM Modi's visit, India signed a deal with GE, General Electric, to procure the technology behind the GE engines, the jet engines, the F414 jet engines. This is going to power the Tejas fighter jet of India, the LCA, Light Combat Aircraft Tejas, which has been developed by HAL. So according to the agreement signed, GE is supposed to transfer the technology to HAL, and HAL is supposed to indigenously produce the jet engines in the country for powering the Tejas fighter jet. Then we also signed a deal for the MQ-9B Reaper armed drones, which is being procured for the Army, Navy, and the Air Force. So even here, there is supposed to be transfer of technology involved, where the manufacturer, General Atomics, which is the American aerospace company that has designed and produced the Reaper drones, it is supposed to share the technology with India to promote local production of the Reaper drones in India. All right, so that is the deal between India and US, and that is why iCET has been hailed as a big success. It is an initiative led by the National Security Councils of India and US. It is personally led by the national security advisors of both the countries. But however, the writer is pointing out that there are certain limitations. It might sound good on paper. India and US, the governments might claim that iCET will lead to transfer of defense technology as well. But in reality, this may not happen because there are certain impediments. The biggest block would be the military industrial complex, the profit-driven military industrial complex of the United States. Why would American companies give away critical technologies to India? See, US government has a motive. US government genuinely has an interest in sharing technology with India because it serves a strategic interest for the US. The US is looking at India as a counter to China. So by arming India, by providing India with advanced weapons, the US is serving its own interest, which is to counter China in the Indo-Pacific. But the American private industries may not share the same strategic vision of the US government. Right? The government is different, the private entities are different. Also, the defense companies in the US, they have a high degree of autonomy. It's not that US government can force them to share technology, because in the US, there are very strict IP laws, intellectual property laws. So why would defense companies in the US, be it General Electric, General Atomics, or even Boeing, Lockheed Martin and the others, why would they simply share the technology with India? They will create roadblocks, according to the writer, because they can do it legally. So if you look at the actual details of the agreement, under the jet engine deal with GE, only 80% of the technology will be transferred by General Electric to HAL. The remainder 20% is actually the critical technology, especially the manufacturing of the metallic discs which are used in the turbines to power the jet engine. This critical technology is not being shared with HAL. They are only sharing some limited technology with India. General Atomics, which produces the Reaper drones, it is going to share only 10 to 15% of the technology with India. So this is nowhere sufficient for enabling a defense ecosystem in the country. This is not true transfer of technology, according to the writer. The governments might claim that iCET is a big success. It is indeed a success, but it's not a big success as claimed by the governments. They are saying that, the writer is saying that there are limitations, there are impediments. The US military industrial complex will never allow critical technologies to be transferred to India, because why would they compromise on their profit? Why would they compromise on their commercial interests? So this could become a potential roadblock. See, previously we had an initiative called the DTII, the Defense Technology and Trade Initiative. This was supposed to be a landmark initiative in defense technology, where US was supposed to share critical defense technologies with India. But this initiative failed. It became a failure because of the same reason, because of the blocks created by American defense manufacturers. So this issue is likely to recur. And the worst part is that in the agreements we have signed with the US, there is a strict prohibition on India carrying out any innovation on its own with regard to the American military equipment that we have procured. See, India is known for carrying out what is called as Jugaad. Indian Armed Forces and our defense manufacturers that we have, DRDO, HAL, etc., they've always taken foreign products, the foreign weapon platforms, and through Indian innovation, right, which is often colloquially referred to as Jugaad of India, we have made the equipment function better in the Indian context. For example, if you look at the Chetak and Cheetah helicopters, right, which operate in the high altitude of the Himalayas, did you know that the original developer of this helicopter, they never believed that this helicopter could fly at such high altitude? We actually procured this from France many decades ago. France was the one which supplied the Chetak and Cheetah helicopters to India, right? So what India did was, HAL and other agencies involved, including the Indian Army, Indian Air Force, they innovated. We made some value additions. We came up with local innovation and customized the product. We custom fit few equipment on these helicopters to make them operable at extreme high altitudes, including the Siachen Glacier. So the French company which originally produced these helicopters, they were shocked that their own helicopters could fly at such high altitude, because there was no prohibition on India from carrying out such value addition. But with US, there is a deal, there is a limitation. Under the agreement with regard to the jet engines with GE and the Reaper drones, India cannot make any changes. We have agreed, we have committed legally that we will not do any changes to the equipment that US is providing for us. We already have many US procured aircraft. We have the P-8 Poseidon, we have the C-17 Globemaster, C-130J Super Hercules. None of the aircrafts can be modified by India because it is prohibited by the United States. So this doesn't leave any scope for innovation as well, for jugaad, for the Indian jugaad, and we get bound to the American suppliers. And as I mentioned, why will the American companies share critical technologies with India? The US government can't force them to do that. So this could become a roadblock, a limitation, an impediment on the defense relationship. Now coming to another important article on page 7. The article talks about the situation with regard to Maoism in the Naxal corridor, particularly in Chhattisgarh. Naxalism, as you know, is a type of left-wing extremism. Naxalism has posed one of the biggest internal security threats for India ever since it started in 1967 at Naxalbari. So this left-wing extremist ideology believes in carrying out an armed rebellion against the state. That is the core philosophy of Maoism, or also called Naxalism. It's based on Maoist doctrine, which was laid down during the Chinese Revolution, during the Chinese Civil War by Mao Zedong. It believes in instigating the masses, the farmers, peasants and tribals and workers, to lead an armed rebellion against the state. And the sole objective of Maoists is to capture state power. So violence is inherent to the ideology. That's why it's an extremist ideology, and there is no place for such extremist ideologies in a civilized democracy. So India has been dealing with this threat from 1967, but in 2004, the threat really escalated for India, because we had multiple Maoist and Naxal groups that were operating until then. We had PWG, People's War Group, operating in Andhra Pradesh and Odisha region. We had the Maoist Coordination Center, the Maoist Committee Coordination Center, MCCI, which was operating in the Bihar, West Bengal belt. So these were different splinter groups of the Naxals or Maoists. But they came together, they united. Since India had weakened these groups, these individual Maoist Naxal groups had been weakened by our security operations, they merged together. They merged all these Maoist outfits to form the CPI Maoist. This was in the year 2004. And since then, we have seen a resurgence of Maoist activity in India. All right. And especially in the Chhattisgarh Odisha belt. This has emerged as the hub of Naxal activity. In the tribal areas of Chhattisgarh and Odisha, in the forested areas, Naxal activity has seen a significant jump. So in 2009, the then Manmohan Singh government carried out a major anti-Naxal operation called Operation Green Hunt, which was led by the CRPF. The CRPF was deployed as the primary anti-Naxal force to assist the state police forces. CRPF even raised a special force unit called Cobra, Commando Battalion for Resolute Action, that specializes in jungle warfare, in guerrilla warfare. So the CRPF, with the support of the state police forces, carried out this extensive counterinsurgency operation called Operation Green Hunt, through which India managed to weaken the Naxal movement again. But post 2015-2016, we have again seen attempts to revive Naxalism and to spread Naxal influence. In the recent years, we have seen attempts to revive the movement and increase the attacks. For example, in Bijapur and Bastar region of Chhattisgarh, in Gadchiroli region of Maharashtra, we have seen recent attacks happening against our police forces and CRPF. Even few civilians have been targeted. So, as the threat was again increasing, the Modi government also has come out with a very elaborate response against Naxalism, and India has managed to inflict significant damage to the Naxals, especially in Chhattisgarh. According to data provided by Ministry of Home Affairs, 2024 has been one of the worst years for Maoists. They have suffered severe setbacks, especially in Chhattisgarh. Just look at the graph over here. According to MHA, 162 Maoist cadres have been killed by our security forces this year in just 7 months. This is one of the highest number of Maoist deaths that have been reported. And parallelly, the deaths of police personnel and civilians has declined. It has gone down. And majority of the Maoists killed, almost 154 Maoists who were killed out of 162, they were all from the state of Chhattisgarh. So this shows that Chhattisgarh region, including the Odisha belt, has become the hub of Naxalism, and especially in districts with poor development, poor governance, like Dantewad, Bastar, Bijapur, Sukma. These 4 have been the focus districts. And Indian forces have done really well, especially CRPF and its Cobra battalion, along with the state police forces. They have mounted major anti-Naxal counterinsurgency operations, and as a result, the death of civilians, the death of security forces has come down. It has seen a major decline to one of its lowest levels, and the Naxal deaths have gone up, which means more Naxal cadres have been killed by Indian forces. And Chhattisgarh reports the biggest loss for the Maoists, which means that India is inching towards a victory in this conflict against Naxalism. But of course, you can't win such ideological wars just by force. You need to address the root causes, which is the lack of development, poor governance, the corruption at the ground level, the absence of administration. These are the reasons which triggered Naxalism in the first place, in rural areas, in forested tribal areas. So addressing those developmental issues remains a priority, and especially in these focus districts, the government is trying to implement certain welfare schemes, initiatives, create infrastructure, so that we can counter the propaganda of the Naxals. This is what we learn from this important article on page 7. Now we head towards the prelim section. Let's take a quick look at the smaller articles in the newspaper. On page number 10, we have an article which says that Soumya Swaminathan, the daughter of MS Swaminathan, also a chief scientist at the World Health Organization, has been appointed as an advisor to the National Tuberculosis Elimination Program. So we should understand what is National Tuberculosis Elimination Program. Previously, it was known by a different name, but it has been recently renamed by the Modi government, and it aims to eliminate TB in India. As you know, tuberculosis is a deadly infectious disease, and India has one of the highest disease burdens in the world. India suffers immensely from tuberculosis, with millions of cases being reported, and lakhs of people lose their lives every year. Plus, diagnosis and treatment has been a challenge. Even though we have a national program to contain and manage tuberculosis, and today we have a goal to eliminate tuberculosis, still we struggle when it comes to promoting the right diagnosis and promoting the right line of treatment. The other concern is the emergence of drug resistance with regard to tuberculosis. The abuse of antibiotics has led to the rise of drug-resistant tuberculosis, and even multi-drug resistant TB has emerged, which has basically threatened the first line of antibiotics that we have. So there are major challenges that India has been facing with regard to tackling tuberculosis. So the Modi government has set an ambitious target to eliminate TB by 2025. This goal, this public health goal, is being implemented under the National Health Mission through the National Tuberculosis Elimination Program. It focuses on early diagnosis, right testing, screening of patients, and promoting the right treatment so that we can reduce the incidence of TB and contain the spread and eliminate the disease altogether by 2025. See, it's a very ambitious target. India may not achieve this target. We might very well miss the deadline because 2025 is next year and we still have a very high load of tuberculosis cases in the country. But this ambitious target is being pursued through the National Tuberculosis Elimination Program. And Soumya Swaminathan has been appointed as an advisor to the Ministry of Health to advise the government on achieving this target and combating the challenge posed by tuberculosis. Next, on page 12, we have an article related to the NEP of 2020. What is NEP? It was one of the biggest reforms introduced in education, the National Education Policy. It is focused on reforming India's education landscape, and it prioritizes learning outcomes over simply pushing students to get marks and clear exams. The NEP came out with a renewed vision to transform India's education landscape, right from primary education going all the way till university and higher education. But with regard to NEP, there have been challenges in implementation because several states have opposed some of the provisions of the NEP. For example, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, even Odisha, which were all opposition ruled, they were in opposition, right? And even Punjab, West Bengal, and few other states, they opposed NEP. But now it's being reported, Tamil Nadu, Kerala and Odisha, they are likely to join the center in implementing the NEP. Odisha, of course, right, it has the same party in power at the center as well. Things have changed in Odisha as of now because of the new elections that were held. But Tamil Nadu, Kerala as well are coming around, even though they are still ruled by the opposition, right? And they are looking to work with the center to implement NEP. Punjab, West Bengal and Delhi have not come on board. They have not shown the same interest. So center is looking to conduct a review of the implementation of NEP. It has been 4 years since it has been implemented. So the center is conducting a thorough review of the implementation with the states, and it has brought all the stakeholders together, like NCRT, CBSE, Kendriya Vidyalayas, then Navodaya Vidyaniketans, all of them, all the institutions, they have been brought together to generate their views and opinions on the implementation of national education policy. So there are some priority schemes under NEP, such as the Samagra Siksha initiative, the PM Shri initiative, and PM Poshan, which focuses on nutrition of children, and Ullas initiative. Now, I want you guys to take this up as an assignment, as a small homework. Please read about these 4 schemes and initiatives and mention the details in the comment section below. Let's look at another article on page 12 related to security again. A Khalistani terrorist outfit, that is Sikhs for Justice, SFJ. It is a banned terrorist entity in India. Under the UAPA, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, the Home Ministry has already banned SFJ as a terrorist outfit for its involvement in pro-Khalistan activities, which is a separatist movement. So now the MHA has decided to extend the ban on SFJ for 5 more years. So this is a big development because the leader of SFJ, Gurpantwan Singh Pannu, he's an American-Canadian citizen based out of United States. Repeatedly, he has called for attacks against India. And recently, it was alleged that India's intelligence agency was planning to assassinate Gurpantwan Singh Pannu. This allegation was made by American authorities. The US is pursuing a case involving few Indian nationals. And it's been alleged that India's intelligence agency was possibly involved in this assassination attempt against Gurpantwan Singh Pannu. India has denied the allegations. India has said we don't have a policy of conducting such assassinations, but definitely the terrorist and his outfit, they have been in the news. So you should know about this development. The ban on this organization has been extended for 5 more years under Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. Coming to the last article for today, we have the UN High Commissioner for Refugees in the news on page 14. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees has visited Pakistan to take a look at the situation of Afghan refugees who are sheltered in Pakistan. Since Taliban took over Afghanistan, a lot of Afghan refugees fled across the border, across the Durand line into Pakistan. But Pakistan itself is going through a deep economic crisis, and it has not been able to provide the required facilities for the Afghan refugees. So they are facing a very serious humanitarian situation. So to take stock of the status of Afghan refugees, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees has visited Pakistan and met with the Pakistani leadership. So please note down the basic facts about this organization. It can be very important for prelims. The UNHCR is a UN agency established in 1950 after the Second World War, because Second World War had created a lot of refugees, especially in Europe. So in 1951, the Refugee Convention was adopted to offer humanitarian protection to these refugees. And in 1950, a UN agency was established to look after the welfare, the protection of refugees. So today it has transformed into UNHCR, Office of the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, and it is headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland. So it mainly works with the governments around the world to protect refugees, to ensure that refugee rights are protected by different governments, and protection is given to displaced communities, stateless people, and ensure that they are resettled and their rights and welfare is guaranteed as per the provisions of Refugee Convention. Now, can you tell me whether India is a signatory to Refugee Convention or not? Tell me in the comments whether India has signed this Refugee Convention and the 1967 additional protocol to it. Yes or no? Let me know in the comments, and do read a little more about this UN agency. It can be very important for your prelims. On this note, I complete today's discussion. I hope it has been a good, useful session, and I hope you have learned something today. If you did benefit, do let me know in the comments. Do press the like button, and I'll see you tomorrow. Till then, take care. Have a good day.